My name's Rachael Finch, and I went from working the night shift as a quality assurance analyst to working fully remote as a business intelligence analyst in less than 100 days.
That's Rachael Finch. She's a biology major who later worked the night shift at an alcohol manufacturing company as a quality analyst, who was able to become a business intelligence engineer in just 95 short days. And Rachael was actually just like you. She listened to this podcast for 365 days before ever joining the Accelerator program. And then within 4 months landed her job. And now we're interviewing her on the show.
They didn't get stuck on the fact that I didn't have data analyst experience. They were more intrigued by how passionate I was to learn more and grow in a role.
In this episode, you'll hear Rachael's full story of how she was able to land the job using the SPN method. She learned the right skills.
I've learned a lot in Tableau.
Created projects and put them on a portfolio and was able to showcase them to recruiters and hiring managers.
She was shocked that someone who doesn't really have a background in business intelligence using Tableau had created a project like that.
And she was able to use her network to get her foot in the door in the data industry.
A friend I go to church with, one of her friends works at United Healthcare. So he kind of gave me the opportunity.
Stay tuned to hear Rachael's full story and see how you can do the same. Rachael, welcome to the podcast. This is so exciting to have you because you were actually a podcast listener for 1 year before you ever joined my program or anything like that. You were a podcast listener and now you actually made it onto the show. What do you think about that?
Pretty exciting. I'm really happy to be here.
I'm stoked to have you as well. Your background is in biology. So you got a degree in biology and you thought maybe you'd go into medical. You thought maybe you'd go into nursing or something like that. You ended up as a quality assurance analyst at Anheuser-Busch, this alcohol manufacturing company, working the night shift. Now, I don't want to, Anheuser-Busch, I'm sure makes some great products, but I can't imagine working the night shift was particularly fun for you.
Definitely not. It was a big change of pace, different lifestyle. I'm just happy where I am now for sure.
Let's talk about where you do now. So you were working quality assurance analyst at Anheuser-Busch, working the night shift, and you were like, man, data sure sounds interesting. You listened to this podcast, Data Career Podcast, for a year. And then January 21st, you joined the Accelerator program. And then on April 25th, I think just 95 days later, you have an offer for a business intelligence analyst role at Optum Healthcare that is not the night shift and is fully remote. So let's go through that journey in those 95 days. What was the biggest difference for you? Like what changes did you make in your life in those 95 days?
Well, even like leading up to that in the year where I listened to your podcast, I had a lot of free time and I knew I wanted to go back to school. Something data. We used Power BI and Anheuser for reports, showing some data every on a day-to-day basis. So I kind of looked for a podcast I could listen to at night and I found yours, not even knowing that you ran a boot camp. So in January, I actually ran a half marathon. I on the same weekend decided to sign up for your boot camp. I think it was a very big momentum step for me. I was just ready to get out of where I was. And I actually had the opportunity to change from night shift to afternoon shift for a quarter. So I had about 3.5 months, which I dedicated my spare time to working throughout the boot camp, applying to jobs. And I think just knowing I had that almost like extra sleep gave me the power to work through the boot camp and really gave me the motivation to get a new job.
I love that. I didn't know you ran the half marathon the same day, basically same weekend that you signed up for the program. I wouldn't say I'm a big runner, but I do quite a bit of running. And actually, by the time this comes out, you guys will have to wait 1 week. But if you're listening, after it came out, I just actually recorded a podcast about momentum, and I actually talked about running races as like a momentum analogy. So I love that you had positive momentum going into the program. Love that you spent the extra time because no matter what you do in your journey, whether you join the accelerator, whether you're just watching YouTube videos, you're doing it on your own, whether you're doing Maven or Data Camp or whatever, it's going to take a lot of effort and it's going to take a lot of energy. So I'm glad that you cleared your schedule and were able to put in the effort for a sprint. Really, it was only, like you said, a quarter, right? Just
Right.
less than 4 months, and you are able to land this job at Optum Healthcare as a business intelligence analyst. First off, Do you have any business experience?
I mean, I worked at a restaurant when I was in college selling pizza. That's probably about as much I have for customer experience, business background. So no, not really.
So, well, that's impressive that you're able to land this job. Did they like your biology background at Optum, or were they kind of like, ah, we don't really care?
I think it was more so like other experiences I had that tied into my biology background. At one point I wanted to be a nurse, so I had some like care aid job experience. I worked in some different labs. I even worked in a research department of a rehabilitation hospital. So I had some data experience with that, as well as like working in that type of patient population. So they liked that part, as well as the more like QA and technical skills that I learned at Anheuser.
I just think that's really important to highlight that even though you maybe didn't have business experience and maybe you had a biology background, your quality assurance analyst role, you had some exposure to BI, you had some exposure to KPIs and metric stuff and
Mhm.
stuff like that. And even like as a nurse, which or as a caregiver, which doesn't necessarily seem like it would tie into data at all. It definitely has some ways that it ties in, which is really cool. But with your background, even with the boot camp, you were applying for jobs and you were kind of struggling to land interviews at first because you couldn't quite figure out the whole ATS, right? Like it was tricky.
Right. So when I first started like uploading my resumes to the ATS softwares, I had pretty good scores. And then when I started nitpicking my resume, my scores actually went down, which I thought was shocking. Using keywords, some of them didn't even pick up on the words. So that was kind of, difficult experience. And I think that's where I really dug deep into the SPN method that you talked so highly about, the networking part, because that's when I started reaching out to other people I knew in, insurance companies or other healthcare positions. And if they knew anyone that had openings that they thought I would be, an asset to the team.
That's so cool. And I think it seems so simple. Like I talk about the SPN method all the time, right? That you need more than just skills to land a day job. Skills are a part of it, but it's just a third. You need the portfolio and then you need the network. And it's so easy to be like, yeah, I agree with that. I want to follow that. But very few people ever actually get very far on the P and even fewer get anywhere on the N. And so let's talk about the N just a little bit here. So you're like, crap, I can't get past these ATSs. I'm never going to land a data job unless I can figure out how to get my foot in the door. And the easiest way to get my foot in the door is if I know someone if at the end part of the SPN method. And so where did you start looking? Just like friends and family? Were you like going through your phone? Were you going through LinkedIn or Facebook or something?
I actually did take a step out of my comfort zone, like you push us to do. Looked in, I'm in Florida in the Jacksonville area. So I was looking in this area, just randomly cold messaging people that were in data roles, asking them how they got there. Oh, do you have any advice for someone like me that wants to break into this field that might not have the exact background, but has the skills and is working towards the skills. And I actually ended up, a friend from my last job had a friend who worked for United Healthcare. And just to break it down, United Healthcare and them are kind of like sisters. They're together in the United Health group. So he let me know if there was anything I saw job wise to let him know, and he would recommend me.
Okay. So you basically messaged a friend and you're like, hey, do you know of any opportunities? How did you know this friend? Was this just like someone from like high school or something?
Actually, a friend I go to church with, one of her friends works at United Healthcare. So he kind of gave me the opportunity if I saw any jobs that I liked to let him know and he could recommend me or let me know a little more about that position.
That's so cool because actually the way I landed my first data job was also through a friend at church. So if you're trying to land a data job, I guess you guys just got to get to church because that's where all the data jobs are. Mine was a little bit different where I was I was at I was in college and I went home for Christmas and I went to church with my family. And I saw this guy that had been like a church leader, like a church youth leader. And we got talking. And at the time, I was still a chemical lab technician. And I was basically getting paid basically minimum wage, maybe even less than minimum wage. And I was just telling him about that. And he's like, well, did you know that I work at a lab right next to, your college? And I was like, no, I did not. And he's like, yeah, you should come check it out. And I said, great, I will. And so I went and took a tour. And then they basically were like, well, you want to be a chemical lab technician here? That's a great opportunity. Sure, I'll do that. You guys are paying more than minimum wage. I'll take it. And then eventually that's when I became at the company I became a data analyst for. So I guess the moral of the story for everyone listening is they just got to go to church to find a data job.
I think so too.
Okay, awesome. So you reach out to this friend, you're like, "Hey, just keep an eye open for me." And how long did it take for them to send something back?
Well, I had seen a job that looked interesting. It was kind of had a vague description, so I sent it along his way and just let him know I was interested in it. And I applied, and he actually had emailed the manager directly. And I got a call back from the recruiter maybe 2 days later saying that, they kind of got a raving review about me. They'd like to set up an interview. It was kind of just a brief phone screen at first, but I guess she liked what I had to say and it progressed from there.
I want to just pause because you basically went from you're getting like Fs on the ATS
It
tracker.
was no, I'm not even kidding. It really must be a church thing.
You're getting Fs, and then all of a sudden you're talking to a recruiter. You got a direct line to this hiring manager right away. And I think that just really goes to show how valuable the end was. Because if you didn't do that, if you didn't reach out to this person and from church, you know, you who knows if you'd have a job right now in the data world, right? You might still be
Right.
working the night shift, but it's all because that end. Was it nerve wracking, like sending that first message to that friend and being like, "Hey, can you help me out here?"
It was because I knew he had, like, a pretty high up role, but I didn't wanna, like, seem like I was using our connection kind of for personal gain, but I've realized, like, since kind of stepping out of, comfortability, that people really wanna promote you and really wanna help you when you're driven. So, that's what I've seen gaining this connection. Now we have one-on-one meetings. He let me know if there's anyone I ever want to talk to just to network with, like he'd set that up. So if anything, it was a great choice on my end to kind of like put the ball in his court and send it down down court to other people.
I love that, to send it. I freaking think that's the way to say it right there is because, like, it is super nerve-wracking to send these types of messages, but as long as you're like you said, like, you're ambitious and you're a good person and you're not, like, just trying to use them, like, you actually value their friendship and you're just like, "Hey, friend, can you help me?" I mean, think about it, if your friend came to you and said, "Hey, can you help me?" and you actually could help them, you'd want to help them, right? So, I think we
Right.
get in our head and be like, "Wow, no one wants to help us," but it's like, if someone came to us and we had the opportunity to help, we definitely would. And if we don't, we just say, you know what, sorry, I can't help. And for us or for whoever's asking, they're in the same boat that they were earlier. So really, there's not much of a lose. It's a low risk, high reward situation. So I'm proud of you for
Thank you.
taking the initiative and doing it because there's a lot of people who don't because they have fear and you pushed it past the fear. I want to talk about when you did talk to that recruiter.
Mm.
What did the recruiter say? What were they, like, interested in you for? Like, what was that conversation like?
I will say, like, she asked me specific questions, and I had mentioned I was in this boot camp, and she was really intrigued by that. I don't know if it's an up and coming conversation in a lot of these type of recruitment calls, but she wanted me to go into more detail and I was able to provide these projects. At this point, I don't think I'd gotten to the NBA Tableau project, but I did the education project at this point. So I got to talk on that a lot. And she was from Massachusetts, so it kind of like made a further connection for her. So she got to see the project and originally in my resume, she didn't know that my projects were hyperlinked. So she was able to go back to the manager and the director and let them know they could actually see my work, not just read the little description about the project.
So that's super cool. I think that one, you had the projects, and that two, they didn't realize it at first, and then they're like, "Hey, do you have any experience with Tableau?" And you're like, "Yeah, just click that title right there," and then boom, your beautiful dashboard pops up. And I didn't know that the recruiters from Massachusetts and that particular project that you did was on Massachusetts data. That's just super lucky. Once again, cough cough, church probably. But like the fact that like this recruiter could go through and be like, oh, look at this county. Like I totally understand the data of this county versus that county. And and kind of enjoy and have those aha moments. I think that's really what the portfolio is all about. So you kind of nailed that, being able to show them, hey, look, I have a biology degree. I've kind of worked in the medical field, and now I'm kind of working as quality assurance. I might not have the ideal data background, but look, here's some evidence that I can actually do what your job description says I can. That must have been kind of a fun feeling to watch them look at your portfolio in real time.
It was because, like, I know throughout the boot camp, I was like we said, a marathon, no, it was a straight sprint. Like, I wanted to learn as much as I could to build that portfolio, to show it off to my network. So, it was really rewarding.
Worth it in the end. Okay, let's talk about the interview. So recruiter interview was the first phone call, is that right? And then what happened
Yes.
from there?
And then she set up an interview with the director of the BI team and then the manager of the BI team.
And how did those interviews go?
That one was great. The first interview was great. She said at the beginning, like, "This is just a conversation, don't be nervous." And that's all it felt. I didn't have any nerves. Usually I'm like kicking, playing with my feet under the table, kind of like moving in my chair, but I didn't have any nerves at all. It felt so easy. And I could talk on the projects we did. I could talk on Tableau. I could talk on some of the, you know, metrics and KPIs I learned while I was in my role at Anheuser and using Power BI. So they didn't get stuck on the fact that I didn't have data analyst experience. They were more intrigued by how passionate I was to learn more and grow in a role. So I think that's what made me stick out to them.
I really like that because in a lot of interview situations, it can feel like, oh, wow, you haven't done any data analyst work in the past, huh? Okay. But if you give them like so much stuff where you're like, I'm super excited about this. I paid my own money and on my own time, I'm learning to do this. Here's, 7 of my projects on different themes. Go look at it. I think you're giving them so much stuff that they could think about and talk about and relate to that it kind of makes the interview process a lot easier for them and you in that way. So I'm glad it went well. So that was like the first interview. What about the final
Right.
interview? Did that go well?
So the final interview was about 2 weeks later, and it was everyone on the team. So I believe 5 or 6 people, and I was straight nerves. I was so nervous that whole time. I was like, "I wonder if they can see me fidgeting." It was that bad. And I felt like I answered a few questions really well, but then it was like I got caught on some word, and I just downward spiraled in my head the whole rest of the interview. But I remember, like, a few questions that were just, like, probably to calm me down and kinda, like, joking with them, and I think that might have, sparked some connection, but they had mentioned that I was, like, one of the first people in the second round, so not to be, like, afraid if I don't hear back for a while.
That's good. I think it's really important to not necessarily make jokes, but have that human connection as part of the interview process. When I interviewed Alex, the analyst, we kind of talked about what he looked for when he was a hiring manager. And one of the things he said is like, I want to make sure that these people are going to be part of my team. I want to connect with them. I want to be able to, vibe with them and kind of be their friend. So I don't, I want to say that's important, but that almost makes it feel like even more nerve wracking in the interview, which people probably don't need. But I think you're right that like that friendliness and your kind demeanor in general probably probably went pretty far. And so that was 2 weeks after the initial interview, is that right?
Right. It might have been a little longer. So, I left that interview thinking I did terrible, but even they reassured me a few things like, "Oh, none of them ever knew Tableau before they started in this role." So, I felt like, "Okay, I kinda have a leg up." But when they said, like, "Don't be afraid, it might take a while," I was like, "Okay, I need to start looking because I did terrible." But 2 days later, waking up at 5:30, night shift, waking up, I was actually going to a concert that night. So I was gonna go into work after going to a concert, and I had an email saying the interview wanted to schedule a final offer call, which was just crazy because I thought I bombed that.
That's a good feeling to have. So that was right before the concert?
Mhm, and I called out of work that night.
That is awesome. Okay. And then you scheduled the final offer. Wow. Before we get into kind of first off, congratulations. That's amazing. And hopefully everyone listening's clapping for you right now and jumping out of their chairs because that's amazing. I want to highlight two things that I think are worth pointing out. That one, you mentioned that the people interviewing your coworkers, this panel, they when they had gotten hired, they didn't know Tableau before. And you had at least known a little bit. Maybe you'd never used it on the job, but through the boot camp you had learned. A lot of people argue with me online that there's no entry level jobs that don't require experience. Now, I think you had some good experience, like you said, as a quality assurance analyst, but it's not like this required 5 years of data analyst experience. But
Right.
these jobs might not be available on LinkedIn jobs. These jobs might not be available on Indeed. It really took knowing someone, that N part of the SPN method and the P part of the SPN method, to even make it that far. So I just want to highlight that. And the second thing I wanted to highlight that you did well is you're like, okay, that interview's over. I'm going to go back to applying for jobs because so many people will land an interview and they'll get so excited and they'll make it to the next round and they'll prep and they'll make it to the next round and they'll prep. And like you said, this was like a 2 to 3 week period, and if you're not applying for jobs in that 2 to 3 weeks and you get rejected at the end, you basically just spent a month and you have no new leads. And so people often just like stop applying for jobs when they land interviews. And you got to keep applying because unfortunately rejections happen. Like it's just part of the process. So I love that you were like, okay, I'm gonna start interviewing. I'm glad I start applying. I'm glad you didn't have to apply very long, but I'm glad that you had that attitude. Anyway, sorry, those are my two tangents. Back to your offer letter. So you're excited. You get the offer letter. Who are you calling? Who are you telling first?
My fiance, my parents, one of my close friends at work,
That's
and
awesome.
and then I reached out to you when I needed some advice for negotiation.
Yes, that's which is one of my favorite parts of the boot camp when I because in the boot camp we have our community and some people update like on everything that happens, right? They'll be like, I got an interview. I got rejected. I got an interview. I can't remember if you had told us about landing the interview or not. But I do remember seeing your I got an offer come through on the community page. And I'm always so stoked when that happens. And then you and I went to some DMs because you were gonna have that call, I think like that morning. And so we were talking about salary and what you could possibly, try to negotiate salary wise, and we were able to get a little bit higher salary than they initially offered, which is great. But regardless, even if we didn't negotiate, you had a data job that was fully remote, which is kind of the goal that you started off with on January
Right.
21st, if I had to imagine, right?
Yes, 100%. I wanted my goal was even if I didn't get a job by June, I was gonna quit and then full-time apply. That was my goal.
And you beat it by the crazy thing is you had an offer in hand, I think April 25th or 26th. And like 2 to 3 weeks before it was like early April. So basically, like you went hard February and March. I mean, end of January, February, March, beginning of April. So really, yeah, like you had this interview like 2.5, 3 months into this journey, which is absolutely incredible. Now let's talk about your job now. You like it?
I love it. It's great. I'm still learning a lot. No, I just celebrated my 3 months there, but there's just so much more to be learned, and I'm excited for that journey, and I don't plan on leaving. So, lots of growth for me.
Are they let's talk about that. So are you learning a lot on the job?
Yeah, so my team actually works with Tableau. We use SQL a little bit, Power BI a little bit, and then like an online platform called Healthy Analytics. But a lot of the work is kind of separated. So there's like a data architecture team, a data management team. So we don't really use SQL. Like we can go in and see SQL views and query it a little bit to like check the data, but we're not writing anything in sequel. So it's not super coding heavy, which probably is why it was a good fit for someone that was a beginner. But I've learned a lot in Tableau. And I think that's like the coolest part because originally I was like, I don't know if I'm so good at visualizations. The iFood project, I remember I can it's scarred in my brain. I made a bar chart with red and green, which is like colorblind 101, a no-no. And I'm like, should I go and take that down? Um, but
No.
just like a bunch of bunch of like different accessibility things I've learned for how to color and size visuals. And then, of course, like a lot of those really cool visuals you see on like Tableau Community, they really are just way too intricate for like people to even understand. So learning how to make a bar chart and a line graph and like a scatter plot, like that's all really what you need to know fundamentally.
I love that, and you are great at making data viz, and I love that you're learning. That's part of my philosophy of getting paid to learn. Right? Is like
Right.
obviously like my boot camp does not teach everything in Tableau. One, I don't know everything in Tableau. I don't think anyone does. But two, if I did, it would be like a year-long boot camp of just Tableau stuff, right? So
Right.
so my philosophy has always been, let's teach you the bare minimum that you need to land a job, and then you can get paid to learn the rest on the job. That's the goal. So I'm glad to hear that you're learning. And also you have a pretty fun announcement in your learning journey as well. You want to share with the audience?
Yeah. So I started my master's in analytics just a week ago now through Georgia Tech. So I will be taking that journey for a while, but I'm really excited about that too. And that was one of the, negotiation points is after 6 months, my company gives a really large stipend towards education, which was just like what I would have had at Anheuser-Busch is just a fraction compared to this. So it really am getting paid to learn that in downtime on my job. They promote like the LinkedIn learning courses, get to watch a bunch of tutorials in Tableau and Power BI. So really what you say about getting paid to learn is such a big thing.
That's an important, caveat there that I don't think maybe a quality assurance analyst necessarily understands or like a teacher would understand is like as a data analyst, you're not working from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. constantly, like, on everything that needs to get like, you have, like, a free hour every once in a while, right? And you like
Right.
you said, like, your company pays for different trainings that you could possibly, go and participate in. They have this education stipend. I am curious, so you already have a data job. Why are you getting your master's? I'm curious to hear.
Honestly, just so I can learn more. I don't have a big, programming background, so I'd like to learn more in that. But also, I don't know if I want to pursue like the business track or more of like machine learning and things like that that maybe taking classes forces me to learn more. So I think, take advantage of the opportunities your company gives you. So
100%. I'm with you. I actually I took the same master's that you're taking, and I started that my like really like after I'd been promoted from my first data job, right about the time I started my second data job. That's when I started that. And it was mostly because I was like, I'm already in the field. I love the field, but I want to make sure that like I can teach in this field so I could eventually go on to start Data Crew Jumpstart. I didn't know that at the time, but that was kind of like what I was thinking. So I think it's awesome. I think it's great. And I think you did it in the right order, right? Because I mean, the program that you're doing in the end isn't millions of dollars, but it's thousands of dollars. I think it's a good program for price wise, but a lot of people will spend, $40,000 and then still not have a data job by the end of it, right? And so I think you did it in the right order where it's like I got the data job, I got my fully remote work I enjoy, doing what I like, and they're going to pay for me to go to school. I think that is the correct order to do it in. So, job well done on optimizing
thank you. Nice little play on words there.
that. Exactly. Okay. Oh, I didn't even catch that. I just caught it now. Oh man, long day. Okay, well that is so amazing that you went through this journey, going from biology, landing this data role. What do you feel like was the biggest factor for you in your journey? Like if you were to meet, Rachel from let's say a year and a half ago, what would you tell Rachel to do?
Probably sign up for the boot camp sooner. Um, there's just so many like similarities that my story has with yours that I was like, I have to do this. Like, and then just like not giving up. I know motivation gets really low when you're, spending hours on the projects and then the write up comes and the write up's like the longest part for me. But just like being consistent And I know I'm not super great at posting on LinkedIn, but throughout the boot camp, I was pretty good about it. And just like working with the community, I know I had like talked to a few people in the boot camp, and I spoke with someone that was a BI analyst in Anheuser-Busch, and then I got someone in the boot camp to talk to him as well. So just like using that network was really important, I think. And definitely, like you say, not letting fear get in the way of things.
I think you did a great job of that, networking and ignoring fear. Rachel, it's been such a pleasure to have you in the boot camp and on the podcast and hear your story. And thanks for sharing your story with the thousands of people that will listen to this. I know that they can take a lot for you. So thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.